Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville, and this is my critique of the Breitling Avenger Nightmission GMT. Why critique, not review? I find that reviews tend to lead you down this path of having this kind of cookie cutter criteria that you apply to every watch unthinkingly. I'm going for something a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is consider that each watch is different. Each watch is appealing to someone different, trying to achieve something different, trying to be something different. So what I've tried to do then is figure out, what do I think the watch company is trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, then analyze the watch against that, and then make some kind of judgment of whether the watch met that criteria. How successful were they in meeting the goals that they set for themselves? I took this from an approach to critique art, to figure out, the difference between good art and bad art is about how successful was the artist in getting across their message. And I'm taking that same idea to figure out whether a watch is any good or not. Anyway, that's the theory. Let's see how it works. See you on the other side for the critique. Okay, so I always start these critiques with a bare bones description just so that we all know we're talking about the same watch. This is the Breitling Avenger GMT Nightmission, reference number V3295101B1X2. This is a travel or Garter, go anywhere, do anything watch. It's going to cost you between $3,600 and $4,400 US, released in late 2019 and still current as at time of filming, early 2021. What Breitling's trying to achieve with this watch is really interesting. Now, across the board as a brand, Breitling's really working really hard to re-establish itself as a provider of instruments for professionals. They're also trying really hard to re-establish the idea that they're more than just pilot's watches. They're really watches for in the air, on the ground, and under the sea. And what Breitling's trying to achieve with this watch is a bit of all of that. This is a tough, dependable, useful, wherever you are, whatever you're doing kind of watch, no matter how extreme the environment, no matter how pressing the circumstances. This is a watch that is intended to provide the core functionality, maybe for the traveler, maybe for the adventurer. It's really leaning on a kind of military-inspired special forces aesthetic. So with all of that look and what kind of traveler, what kind of luxury watch is this? I'd say it's a watch intended for someone who thinks that luxury is trekking in the Atlas Mountains or glamping in Namibia, perhaps hiking in Patagonia. These are all very expensive things. These are definitely luxury holidays. There might not be a cruise ship, a spa, or a cocktail lounge in sight, but make no mistake, this is a watch designed for a luxury adventurer. So with all of that said, how does the watch do? Well, the first thing is in 2021, the whole concept of instruments for professional is at least as much an aesthetic choice as a functional one. But a phrase you'll hear me use a lot is, in watches, form has to follow fiction, not function. What I mean by that is, if we were talking pure function, let's be honest, we're not wearing a mechanical watch, we've got a Garmin. But the story, the fiction, the narrative is that this mechanical watch will be that true Garter thing. And what I would say is Breitling has gone really hard on that with this watch. The tough looking murdered out black DLC coating with the military inspired details and desert sand markings just looks the business. Starting with the case, it's simple, no nonsense, clean, pared right back. All the things it should be. Some of the things I really like is that there's nothing unnecessary. Closed case back, fantastic. All the edging and shaping is only just what's needed. Same for the DLC. They've put that on not like paint, slathering it thick, blurring all the details, but rather they've used it like I would as an engineer on an aircraft part if I was like CAD plating it. It's super thin, just barely enough to do its job to reduce friction, protect the surface, keep corrosion at bay, that sort of thing. Really emphasizes that industrial, nothing more than absolutely needed feel. Speaking of thin, I can't let it go without saying for this watch, an automatic 300 meter diver with a GMT function at only just over 12 millimeters thick, that's really, really good. It is one of the thinnest going around and is down around like Rolex GMT Master thinness. The bezel is typical Breitling, nice Goldilocks width, not too fat, not too thin. Typical Breitling rider tabs, love them or leave them, at the 12, 3, 6 and 9 with a big blob of pearlescent lume at the 12. That is super legible. Totally unlike the minute markers between those rider tabs. Get really close, look at them in the real light, in the right light. And those minute markers are crisp, clean and clinical, but they're really not easy to see. Function has definitely been sacrificed for form with those markers. On the dial, straight matte black with minimal texturing, military-styled numerals across the board. There is a step away from this less is more kind of feel, but personally I'm kind of glad that they have sacrificed the kind of the ideological purity for just looking better. The hands are quite small and very straightforward, and when I first saw this watch, I thought that legibility and time telling would be compromised, but they're not. It is very easy to tell what time it is with those hands, which would mean they are by definition the right size. I'm not sure what magic is working, but certainly the interplay between the hands, the markers, and the numerals, you can always tell the time, and that's basically what the hands have got to do. I think the decoration across on the dial is excellent. I know some people really get funny about Breitling using the B without the wings. I personally don't. I think the plain Breitling on the heritage pieces is appropriate. But this is not a heritage piece. This is a modern piece intended to be used in all the environments. And in that case, I think the winged B was a smart choice, and I'm really glad Breitling went with it. I normally hate too much text on dials, and this one's pretty good. I would love to see it. If I had more skill, I'd do it myself, but I would love to see this watch face with say the date removed under the Breitling, or perhaps either the chronometer or the Avenger, I wouldn't care which, removed, and have that text streamlined even more. But yeah, it's not too bad right now. There is a functional, unobtrusive and discreet date tucked away at the 3. All of this is under a slightly domed crystal with amazing AR. This is something that Breitling does, I think, almost better than anyone else. In most lights, that crystal just vanishes. I suspect that's probably a benefit of making that in-house, I guess. I do like the kind of emerging common language between the Breitling and the Super Ocean. I love it. It is very distinctive, and I know a lot of people won't like it, but you know what? I kind of like that a lot of people won't like it. I'm firmly of the view that any design that can be kind of universally liked by most people is going to be loved by almost no one. I think to make something that people really love, you have to be willing to risk having some people really loathe it. So I know some of you aren't going to like the overall look of this watch, but that's okay, because the people like me that do like it are going to really love it. Okay, so all of that's been really positive. It's not perfect though. There have been a number of cases where I suspect the designers have been faced with a clash of options and they've had to make a compromise. For example, and a lot of these are going to revolve around the date wheel. I would have preferred in general, and I think specifically here, the date wheel to be color matched. I would have preferred the date wheel to be black. On the other hand, I do wonder if they'd made it black, would the date have just vanished? Would we have lost sight of it altogether? There is a lot going on this dial, and if that date had been black, would we have just missed it? I don't know. I think I would have preferred it to be blacked out, but I can understand why it's not. Similarly, I normally think a date should always be at the 430. That is where the date, if you like, costs me the least in general. But given here that we've gone for indices at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 and numerals at the other markers, I'm kind of glad that they moved the date to the 3. If they'd have put the date in the proper place at 430, I could have lost part or all of the 4 and the 5. So losing just part of the indice is a better choice for me there. I've never been convinced that red on black is all that legible. I generally would like GMT hands to stand out more than this one does. However, having made the choice to go with those desert sand markers, an orange GMT hand would have just been silly. So again, this is another one of those cases where once they'd committed to the desert sand color, they probably couldn't use the orange. Red's the next best option. So whilst red hands are not my favorite, I think it was still the best choice here. One place where there wasn't a compromise, I just think they've flat out made a bad call, is in not looming the numerals. These numerals are the same kind of style, a little bit different, but being big and bold and applied, very similar to the numerals on the Super Ocean, which are loomed and are a fun little party trick. They haven't done it here, and I don't know why. Look, it's not a deal breaker, but it just feels like an opportunity lost. I know I've been praising the watch for not indulging in these unnecessary fripperies, paring it back to only what's required. But again, I think sometimes you've just got to be prepared to sacrifice that ideology. And I do wish they had have sacrificed some of that purity here and just given us a bit more fun by looming those numerals. Okay, that's the look. Now let's talk about the build. Quick one for the spec hunters. Grade 2 titanium, sapphire crystal with AR top and bottom, 300 meters water resistance, screw down crown guards. Basically everything you'd expect for this kind of Garter watch. The loom application looks okay. I'm not a super expert here. I don't go through it and test it Jody style at just one more watch. But my quick and dirty, seems to be fine. The construction across the board is excellent. The case shapings and finishing are all really simple, as they should be. But they're all elegant and everything flows naturally. It's kind of as you move from one surface to the next, from one place to the next, the watch does as you would expect it to. The DLC finish is flawless. Transitions between planes are crisp and clean. I can't find a sharp or a clumsy dull edge anywhere. And each of those planes is brushed, and the joins where the brushing comes together is very neat. Quite often those where brush meets brush surface, you get a kind of messiness, a fuzziness. None of that here. The hands and the dials, etc., are all really good, no matter how hard I look at a hand or an indice or a marker. Everything looks right. Everything looks straight. The printing looks crisp and clean. The hands all line up at the important parts. There's no rough edges that I can see anywhere. The loom application's nice and even, and they've kept it inside the lines. The movement's a Breitling caliber 32, which is modified by Breitling, built up from an ETA 2893-2. Breitling has been using Solita movements a bit of late, but judging from the jewel count, which Breitling tend to get right, this is most likely an ETA, because the ETA and the Solita in this case have slightly different jewel counts. They're advertising the jewel count from the ETA. I think that's what they're using. Now that caliber is a solid but not a brilliant choice for this watch. It is predictable and reliable and easy to repair no matter where you are in the world, so that's all good, but I'm not sure it matches the toughness that this watch is trying to convey. This watch again is a true GMT in that the GMT hand is not slaved to the hour hand. It can be set independently, but it's a tracker, not a traveler style GMT. That is that when you're changing it as you move time zones, it will move the GMT hand, not the local hand. That's fine. It's not the end of the world, but I don't think it quite fits the brief that we have here of a go anywhere, do anything watch for the adventurer, for the traveler. I really do think they should have gone with a traveler implementation here. The bezel is brilliant. Some people hate the rider tabs. I love them. They do their job perfectly. One, they make seeing the markers absolutely, those 15-minute markers, absolutely dead easy. And on top of that, they make gripping the watch, gripping the bezel, super simple. No matter how cold it is, either when you've got your hands have gone numb, or perhaps if you're in wearing gloves, bezel remains useful. Exactly what you would want with this kind of watch. Sticking with the bezel, it is a captive or screwed on bezel. No matter how hard you bang this thing, you will not be popping that bezel off. You will not lose it, and there is zero wobble. The bezel has a lovely action. I'm not going to try and compare it to a Rolex or anything. It's probably not quite as nice, but it is positive, crisp. There's no crunch, no play, no bounce. It's lovely. Okay, so wearing the watch. It is 52 millimeters lug to lug. There is no getting around it. This is a big watch. Being thin and those lug shapes certainly do help with fit, but at the end of the day, this is really going to fit bigger wrists. We're probably talking 6.5 inch and above. On that point, I need to stress, I do not think they should have made this watch smaller. A watch like this, trying to achieve what this watch is trying to achieve, should be big. What I think they should have done is made a smaller version as well. Say a 38 millimeter with a lug to lug in the mid 40s. That'd be great. And that would really bring home, more broadly, that would kind of bring home the idea of inclusivity that Breitling is talking about. The only question would be, would there be a market for a watch like this around about that 38? I don't know. In terms of feel, when you're wearing the watch, look, those low slung, downward sloping lugs are fantastic. At only 12.3 millimeters thick, lovely svelte case, all combined to give you a really solid, planted feel on the wrist. This thing does not shake around, doesn't wobble, isn't top heavy, doesn't move. The slightly protruding case back creates effectively a chamfer between the case back and the mid case. So again, very, very comfortable. What I would say too is I'd describe this watch as having an expected weight. And what do I mean by that? With some titanium watches, they can feel unexpectedly, freakishly light and can be a bit disconcerting. What I would say is yes, well, the titanium does make this watch light. It's down around about 100 grams. Given its sturdiness and given its size, it is light for what it is, but it is not a light watch. It's not, as I say, disconcerting to wear. Okay, finally, wrap this up. Presence. This is a 45 millimeter wide case. So again, like lug to lug, no getting around it. This is a big watch. Having said that, the solid matte black finish across the board visually shrinks it stealth fighter-like. So it definitely looks like a smaller watch than it really is. Now, it's not going to vanish to nothing. I would say, visually, eyeballing it, this watch has about the same visual presence as, say, a normal 42 watch in plain steel would be. So you lose about 3-ish millimeters of kind of apparent size, perceived size, down from that 45. So that's my analysis of this watch against Breitling's own criteria, against their own standards of success for this watch. How do I reckon it went? How would I judge it? If I was writing a report card, I'd say something like, looks great, shows great potential, not sure if it can follow through. There's a few areas I'd like to see it work on. In particular, look, this watch is aiming to be a tough as nails, industrial strength, go anywhere, do anything watch. And it's got the look nailed. If you I think they've just got that perfect. The issue I have is, does it have the substance behind it? Now, you could argue that in the 21st century, the substance doesn't really matter. It's all about the look. And there's some truth to that. But when you're asking near as damn it to 7,000 Australian dollars for a watch, I think the look, it has to be more than just looks. As I've said before, the form has to follow the fiction. And I'm not sure that the form, in terms of what it can actually do, what it can actually take, necessarily supports the fiction that this is a $7,000 industrial strength, go anywhere, doing anything watch. Give it a traveler GMT function to really reinforce the idea that this is a watch for adventurous luxury travelers. Give it something like METAS certification so that you can, when we talk about toughness, you can hold it up against something and measure it and compare it. Then I think you're getting there. That's what's missing. It's those last little bits. And it's those last little bits that also hold me back from necessarily saying that this is actually a $7,000 watch. Now compare it to the Omegas that do have that kind of METAS certification that I'd be looking at. Different styles, albeit, but they've got that kind of toughness that I'm after. And then you're looking at Aquaterras and Planet Oceans that are considerably more expensive. The Aquaterra, I'm looking at around about 9,000 Australian. And for the Planet Ocean, I'm now starting to get up to 11,500 Australian. So what that tells me is that this watch, the Breitling, isn't totally out of the ballpark. It's not unrealistic. And if you were to spend the kind of money they're asking, $7,000, you're not being ripped off. I just think it just feels sporty. It feels like a bridge too far. I think to justify the price and maybe even a small increase, there needs to be a little bit more substance in this watch. The last thing I would say is I think the size is great. I would not like to see Breitling issue this watch or have this watch as nothing but 42, for example, or God forbid, something around 40. I think something around 40 would be great for small people, but for someone like me with a 7.5 inch to 7.75 inch wrist, I think 45 millimeters is ideal. I would, if I was running Breitling, investigate whether it's possible to make a smaller version as well. As I said, something in the probably 38, 40 millimeter range, because a watch like this is supposed to be big, is supposed to be really useful out there when you're doing difficult things. And so a 40 millimeter watch for a small person would make sense. For someone like me, 45 millimeters is perfect. So that's really my take on this as a professional, semi-professional largely, reviewer. What about me as a human being, as a person, as a watch buyer? Well, I bought the bloody thing. I reached into my own pocket and paid my own money. Those of you who have seen me here, I am not a flipper. I buy watches because I love them and they're going to be in my collection for the rest of my life. And I am so happy I bought this. That said, I've got to be honest and say I didn't pay full retail for this. And I probably wouldn't recommend other people do. And at full retail, I'm not sure if I would have bought it. So that's it. That's my take on this watch. Be really interested in what you guys think. I won't be surprised if some of you hate it. I am firmly of the opinion that every watch should have someone who will hate the design. Because if a watch is so vanilla that no one hates it, then no one's going to really love it either. So I love it. I strongly suspect some of you won't, but that is more than fine. I actually welcome that. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. Leave some comments below. Follow me on Instagram. Hit the like and subscribe. I don't say that enough, do I? And I'll see you later. Bye.